We are back with another edition of the Smart Driving Cars podcast. We appreciate you tuning in. I'm Fred Fishkin, along with the Faculty Chair of Autonomous Vehicle Engineering at Princeton University, Alain Kornhauser. Hi, Alan.
Hey, good morning, Fred, or afternoon, or noon, or whatever it is.
And joining us once again from Sweden, which is afternoon when it's morning here and nighttime when it's afternoon here, the consultant and publisher of The Dispatcher and co-author of The Real Case for Driverless Mobility, Michael Sena. Great to see you again, Michael.
It's great to be here, as always.
And in the March edition of The Dispatcher, the top featured article is headlined People and Transport. Parking Policy, the politics of parking a car in a city. And once again, you start out with a bit of a history lesson. And I learned the parking meter is turning 90 this year.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what I thought. I do remember that when I first got my driver's license and I was parking the car in downtown Scranton, that I could park for the whole day for about 25 cents. And I never even thought about, who invented these and when did they start dotting our curb lines. But it wasn't all that long ago. 90 years, yeah. It was a terrific invention. I mean, as I said in the article, it was a fantastic way of making sure that people didn't park longer, because before that they would mark the cars with chalk, which they still do in many places. And then they'd come back and say, well, you've parked further longer than this, and so we're going to give you a ticket. But here, with the parking meter, they were able to both make sure you weren't parking too long and then get a little money on the side. But the important thing was, if cities put these parking meters in to earn money, they were ruled to be illegal. So that the idea of enforcing the parking regulations had to be preeminent. And that's why they couldn't charge too much, because if they start charging too much, then people could make the case that they're only using this to take money, and it's taxation without having a basis in legal terms for doing it. So
Taxation without representation, is that?
yeah, that's a good lead into a plug that I want to make for everyone. Given the times that we're in right now, I strongly recommend two books. One of them, actually probably the first one to read, and I've written about this book in the newsletter, by Colin Woodard, American Nations. And this book by Harvard professor, he's a professor in Maine, Harvard professor Joe Lepore, these truths, one of the best history lessons. This is also a fantastic history lesson, but in a very different way. Actually, they both went to Tufts University. I don't know what it is about Tufts, and training people. It's these kinds of books that tell a story that have helped to inform me about the importance of looking historically at things that we often take for granted. And parking just happens to be one of those. And as with many of the things that we take for granted, it's disappearing. I just read today in the newspaper, our newspaper here, that Stockholm is following in the footsteps of many cities in the United States, eliminating parking as a requirement for building apartments and offices. So that if you build apartments and offices, the people who work in them are just going to have to figure out some way to park their car, because there's not going to be parking spaces available for them as part of the residential units or the offices. And they think that by doing this, that they will reduce the number of cars in the cities, which in fact, what they will achieve is having not only fewer cars, but fewer people in cities, because right now there's no alternative to having a car available to you. So people will just move further out. So
It is interesting, and just touching briefly on the parking meters story, and I don't know if you
mhm.
have any thoughts on it. It's all moved to an app these days. I mean, you go to Princeton or any other place, it's all app based. I guess if you don't have a smartphone, you can be out of luck in many places.
Well, I progressed through that, and I think the first time that I experienced the frustration of not being able to park because I didn't have, not one, I didn't have the app, and I certainly wouldn't have had it in the place where it was. It was in the center of London many years ago after they put in the congestion, so-called congestion charging. And in Stockholm, when we first moved there, or when I first moved there, we had on-street parking, and it was residents, like in Cambridge. I gave the example of parking in Cambridge with a resident permit. That was back in the early 1980s when I lived there and worked in Stockholm. And then we bought an apartment there about 12 years ago, and I've seen from parking meter to having a place where you went to and put money in, to now having you can park with a credit card, but many of those are disappearing as well, where you have to have an app and you send an SMS and then you get confirmation, and it's all done with an app. If you don't have the app, you're SOL. You just hope that you don't get a ticket,
Alan, are
which
you
is
liking the apps, the app-based parking?
I had to go to Philadelphia for a medical treatment, and I was forced to really, download the app and to be able to park there and whatever.
how
Uh,
expensive was the ticket if you got one?
oh, I have no idea. Whatever, you know.
Yeah,
I mean, I assumed, and I guess I don't know.
I think I have a bunch of apps for different places.
different places.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's the other thing. If you can use one app in Stockholm, but we move around a lot. We don't have we don't have metered parking in the place where we live now. We have a little something you have to put in on your dashboard with a time, and it's 2-hour parking. So you put the time when you got there, and then you've got 2 hours to park, and you come around and check and see if you think you're smart and you say, well, it's 11 o'clock, but I'll put 12 o'clock, so I'll be able to park until 2, when you should only be able to park at 1. That if somebody comes like at 11:30 and sees that you've got a 12 on there, you're going to get a ticket anyway. So
Well, moving along in the
yeah,
musings section of the dispatcher, you have AI and the Pope. You list some things that you don't agree with the Pope about, but you do agree with the church's cautionary guidance on AI, artificial intelligence.
yeah. I don't know how many people are going to read the um, the document which I've put in there, um, but I strongly recommend that people do, because it's worth it for a couple of reasons. First of all, what what is the Catholic Church and the people in the Catholic Church doing, writing about artificial intelligence? Why should they think that they've got any right to do that, or have the capability of writing about it? And I think if you do read this document, which I've tried to summarize and I've put in clips from it, um, it's actually very well written. It's very well researched. If you can get past the points in there where it says, uh, you should do this because God says these things are worthwhile doing, and he says, or she says,
That's it. You
these
got
other things aren't so worthwhile doing. So if you can get past that, and if you can also sort of, okay, I don't believe in God, I don't believe in the Catholic Church. In fact, I don't. That's not me. I'm just saying as an example. Um, yeah, but there are other people millions of people who pop up, uh, just as an example, us, but people who suddenly become experts in just about anything. Um, they put themselves in front of you with on a so-called iPod, and suddenly they know everything that you should know, and I'm going to tell you what it is that you should be thinking. The church has been doing this for a lot longer than most of these folks who are so-called influencers. The Catholic Church has been influencing for a little over 2,000 years, and they've got some pretty good people who know what they're talking about when they need to talk about a certain subject. And on this subject, which I believe happens to be more in the field of ethics than in the field of technology or techniques, I think it's worthwhile at least hearing their point of view. I did the same with the project 2025, and a lot of people just dissed it and said, "Well, this is by Trump supporters." And then Trump says, "I don't know anything about these guys, who they are, what they're doing." That was in the last issue. So if you haven't read the last issue, then you can go back to that one. What are you doing supporting this group of Trumpites? And I said, this isn't Trumpites. This is conservative Republicans, their view about what we should be doing with transportation. One of the things that they didn't say was that we should be laying off 4% of NHTSA, which I read just a few hours ago. So the dispatcher. This is going to segue into your last question, or last issue. The dispatcher over the last 13 years, 12 years, has really tried to look at different subjects from different points of view. And to sort of, there are different perspectives, and there are different ways that you can look at a subject and get a different result. I mean, some people think that we'll never have driverless cars, which some people call autonomous or self-driving. Advanced driver assistance systems don't work. Nobody trusts them. They shouldn't be even allowed to be sold. Well, different points of view. And what I've tried to do in the dispatcher is to take an issue, look at it from different perspectives, or provide different perspectives, and then have an analysis of what are some of the good points of this perspective, and what are some of the good points or bad points of this perspective, and then wait for the responses from my readers. Sometimes they've come, sometimes they haven't.
And I guess that leads us to the Dispatch Central, where you're telling readers that for now, at least, this is the last edition of the newsletter.
Yeah, I mean, 12 years, a lot of been a lot of words that have passed through my fingertips and into the digital world and into the piece of paper that I've sent over in PDF format. They're all still there on my website, and funnily enough, I have actually printed out not the last 12 issues, but every issue that I've done up to this point. I've given one of my very dedicated readers a copy of one of these books. There are, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are 6 of them. There will be 7 when I print this next one out. It's a couple of thousand words or pages. It's been a tremendous experience, and for those who have commented and those who have sent in their ideas and thoughts, and not always agreeing, but providing me with their input, which I can then incorporate into other ways of looking at issues that I've addressed. Many of them have centered on driverless technology, but I've tried to put cars into the context of, everyone needs one, whether it's a car or a bus or a taxi or something. We've moved quite far from when we just walked and then we rode and then we drove. horses and oxen in front of us. And then, here we are today, getting to a point where cars will, and trucks and buses will eventually be driving us without a driver. It's been a long journey, and it's definitely not over. We've got a lot to do, but it's always and should always be in the context of, why are we doing this? People don't just drive around. Unless you're a kid on Friday night, then maybe you do just drive around, but people use these vehicles to get places. And they've done a very good job of getting us to places. We've had a couple of little things along the way, like climate change and accidents and that sort of thing. But somehow we've all managed to move forward, and cars are a lot safer and cleaner than they were 100 years ago, 50 years ago, 25 years ago, and I expect they'll be better in the future. But I think groups of people, the evergreens, seem to think that, nobody else should drive cars. I grew up in a car and I was able to do everything that I needed to do, but now I'm here and nobody else is going to be able to use cars. Nobody's going to be able to park cars, buy cars. And I think that's rather selfish. I think we should be doing everything we can to help people be as mobile as they possibly can. And many people, and this is what Alan and I have been working on together now with, and you as well, Fred, with driverless cars and improving the mobility of people who don't have the possibility of buying or driving or having a ride themselves.
And there's another book coming.
Yeah, there's another book coming. That's in the works. We're moving through it now. We have two chapters in a fairly good draft form, a third one in the way, and 7 or 8 more to go. We're due to publish next year, and Ellen and I are working on all of the different aspects of the information that will be going into that book, which Alan is more up to talking about than I am.
Yep, we are doing that, and I guess part of, the book will talk about what we're doing. We're also trying to do the walk about what we're doing, is actually do it instead of just talking about it. And I think the book is really a documentary in some sense of actually trying to do it.
Yes.
Because both of us have become kind of frustrated with the progress in actually giving people rides with this technology. So much has been done focused on the technology, but really so little has been done on the sociology of actually doing it. What is the value proposition associated with this? And I think, thinking back, maybe, whether or not Henry Ford, when he was putting together the assembly line to basically create a vehicle that would allow people to really, in some sense, break out and use it for the value proposition of the user, to improve the quality of life of the user. Certainly he was doing it to improve his quality of life and his whatever, but his wealth, let's put it that way. But I don't think it. I guess I sort of doubt that it was the wealth increase was really the motivation. He probably he had to have a vision that this is really a valuable thing, that if only we could bring the price of it down to a point where more could benefit from it, then what we have is a situation in which in which the demand substantially outstrips the incremental reductions in affordability, and that it just then just accelerates and does this exponential growth business that
Mhm.
really that he helped stimulate it in the beginning. And in some sense, if one looks at almost any business that goes through this process, you know, Google search was a substantially better way to find information
Then,
and more affordable way than going, let's say, to the library and looking through the Dewey Decimal System and bringing out a drawer and picking it up and going to the shelves and picking up a book. And, you know, the information was there. And the ability to find was there.
yeah.
But my goodness, you know, the making that the affordability there was the opportunity to execute it at very much lower cost, the cost, time, money, everything
Yeah.
that we're not finding. And in some sense, if you want to go to the whole so-called AI, large language model, whatever that thing happens to be, geez, it's the issue is it really now all of a sudden giving us this much more affordable, easy, affordable. They're not necessarily in dollars, but in certain individual output to be able to get a information, a hint, the right thing to go do whatever it is that one wants to do. So in a sense, Henry, going back to Henry created the vehicle. I think one of the things we're really looking at and keep believing the opportunity with driverless is the affordability piece. You know, I recently went into a rant with a bunch of other people saying, you know, it's not about safety. Okay, because if you really want to solve safety, if you want to wait for driverless technology to do it, you know, it's going to take you a very long time because you got to wait for it. I mean, if you really want to deal with it, there are probably there's some other drastic things you could do with respect to the potential safety issue.
Well,
Yeah,
back to the
but
newsletter. I think
but anyway,
I've spent a lot of time during these 12 years exactly on that issue.
yeah,
That driverless technology today and driverless technology in the future is going to be safe to the extent that the advanced driver assistance systems that we've been developing for the last 25 years are incorporated and are operational. We've come a tremendous distance with advanced driver assistance. I'm putting a plug in for ADAS because
yeah,
it has done
agree,
more, and it's the basis of what is being done today with driverless technology. But that's not the only reason for having driverless technology.
right,
So it's like the assembly line had a lot of other applications, but the one thing that it did was to make the assembly and manufacturing of vehicles much less expensive, and therefore more people could buy them,
right,
including my grandfather, who drove his brothers-in-law to the mines every day rather than having to take the trolley.
yeah,
So
yeah,
we,
yeah.
yeah,
That's the point both of us are trying to make here, and
yeah,
it's somewhat astonishing that this affordability opportunity to provide more mobility to people who don't really have reasonable mobility is just not is not in the forefront. It just doesn't. I don't know, or maybe we're not seeing it or something. I don't know, but it's just not what's being pushed out there
No.
or sold, or maybe that doesn't have the opportunity to raise the hundreds of billions of dollars that it's taking to do this job, and therefore you had to have some other carrot out there, that would be, oh, I got to have that one. And I guess, if you look at what Alphabet has done, they bet on safety. Well, I guess great, wonderful.
Yeah.
I
Well,
don't know.
as you know, in the last issue, I
Yeah,
said, and this is the second time I put it out there, Alphabet is not in the ride delivery business, and neither is Waymo.
yeah,
And they're looking for a different return, which is part of their business and is their business, which is ad brokering.
yeah,
I think one of the main problems is that people don't see or don't recognize the size of the potential market for people who are not able to drive, are not able to get the rides that they need, and who are just simply forgotten about. I mean, it's a new market. It's not stealing from another market. The other thing that sometimes I think we try to hide this factor, we being those who are writing about advanced concepts of mobility. Uber is a break even, barely. It was losing money on brokering rides because that's the business it's in, on ride brokering. It sort of came out as a break even this year. The only reason it's still in business is that it found ways of making money by delivering pizzas and delivering other goods. But as far as brokering rides, it takes in a lot of money, but it spends as much. So those people who invested in Uber thinking that they were going to make gobs and gobs of money, they've made it already. I mean, Uber is not a stock you invest in today for any reason, and growth is definitely not one of them. But people are investing heavily in companies like NVIDIA because they believe that NVIDIA will fuel the artificial intelligence. But look what happened to NVIDIA as soon as whether it was real or not real, as soon as this thing came out of China, stock just collapsed. And of course, it after everyone realized that they were being duped, the stock rose again. But the opportunity for delivering rides to a very large number of people, not just in the United States, but all over the world, is very large. And when investors understand that, and understand that they can invest in technology to actually do something rather than just technology as a technology. Driverless technology, investing in driverless technology isn't worth the investment, except for those who get in early and get out quickly. And it's the same with NVIDIA. NVIDIA right now is gone to where it is, not because it's a technology, but because people think it can drive a real application which people will use, which is artificial intelligence.
Well, that's why we always love having you with us, Michael.
Yeah.
We
And that's why I love being here.
put things in perspective, and we should tell people that there's more info. People can find, I think, all of the dispatchers still, right, at
Yeah, they're
michaelsena.com.
all there, up to the last one.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me. This has been it's been a real pleasure discussing with you both, Alan and Fred, the dispatcher. I hope we have opportunities to do this for other reasons, but until we do, I thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
we
As you,
will. We will continue. I mean, we're not. I'm not stopping the discussion. You've inspired me, so I'm not going to stop discussing this stuff with you. It is. And maybe we'll spend a little bit more time on the artificial intelligence. Hopefully, it's not artificial stupidity, it's artificial intelligence.
Just a couple of other items that we wanted to bring out that are in the upcoming newsletter, Smart Driving Cars newsletter. One being research. These experts were stunned by OpenAI deep research, a piece by Timothy Lee that you'd sent along, and that caught your eye. I think you talked about it a little bit when Michael was on with us.
Yeah, it's very interesting. First of all, the kinds of tasks that they put, which I think are quite appropriate tasks. Their response, which was the results were pretty good. But is that bar high enough for this? I have very good students. They do very nice work. But it's not really of the quality that one ends up having to produce it in a work environment type of thing. The bar is much higher. During the learning process, during the education process, there's education going on, and it's a preparation. But I think that what is asked of people, the kinds of questions that were being asked, one is looking for, I think, maybe a better answer than, hey, this is surprisingly good. I mean, it's got to be not better. I think it needs to be better than surprisingly good. Now, if it is a beginning that allows the individual to then create something that is really good, then that is really valuable. But as an end in and of itself, to create, sort of nice things, what's the big deal? There's tons of stuff that's really nice that just doesn't get appreciated by anybody and is not really worth being appreciated by anybody. But it's the good stuff that really pops out. And how do we get to the really good stuff? How do we get to the really creative? How does it help us work through that? I don't think it does abide. I don't think it's not smart enough yet. It's not artificial intelligence. It's still artificial stupidity. I don't know.
And the deep research functions where, as you were saying, it, digests and does, I'm not sure what, for 30 minutes or however long.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of digestion going on. And the question is what, whenever you give this to let's say, a consultant, let's say when Michael Sena did, hiring him as a consultant, one, you sort of know going in somewhat where he's coming from, what his biases are. And I think you expect something really special from him. Otherwise, you wouldn't have retained him. You don't want to just, whatever, surprisingly good. No, nobody's looking at from I mean, if that's all McKinsey is, who would pay McKinsey? Or I don't know. I mean, that's a whole other question. And I don't think, and this thing went and thought, and it went and introspected, but from what perspective? Certainly can't be all perspectives. Wasn't trained on all. Where were the biases? Where's the good housekeeping seal of approval on this thing? Whose is it? And so I think, because because the type of questions one is asking is not what 2 + 2 is. It has a deterministic answer to it. That's easy. Even writing code is easy. Hey, write me the code that does this process and starts with this and ends with that. That's a pretty straightforward question. But the type of questions that one would ask a human to help with as opposed to just a knee-jerk reaction, which is, you have that over cocktails and pass the sweet and sour chicken. Big deal. And hey, and we listen to those things, and it's kind of, it goes back, it's part of our going through the day. But if you have a real question and you want a real answer, and so I don't know. So I think we have a ways to go yet.
We do.
Or
And
I don't even, I guess my biggest problem, I don't even know what the right question is. So sorry, I guess I'm not the guy.
there's another story.
Google used to, I tried to, when you did a search, it said we came up with 2 gazillion whatever to do 42, results in 0.02 seconds. Ooh, Jesus. I mean, I really only wanted the top one, and please don't have it be one that somebody paid to put in my face. So I have to go down through, I have to have finally the one that, supposedly. Now all of a sudden this thing spends 30 minutes to write these pages for me. I just don't. Which leaning did it do? Where was it coming from? What was its pedigree? And don't tell me it just got trained on everything, Anyway.
A lot of questions.
I think yeah. Unfortunately, I wish I had the answers. I just have questions. Who?
Alan, the other story that another story that you're including in the newsletter has to do with the Black Hawk crash with the plane in Washington, and I guess what we've heard has been pretty disturbing. Some of the latest.
It's just chilling. How do you find yourself in such a position? You have a helicopter that the government paid who knows how much for, more than a nickel. And it has 2 altimeters. And the question is whether or not the altimeters were given the co-pilot and the pilot the same information. And each needs to be individually calibrated. Okay. But they're not talking to each other and saying, we're given the same. Really? Okay. And we have, this is a military thing. We have GPS up there that was the military put up there for military use. How many years ago? And that's not good enough. That would your secret signals and all that stuff. What? And then you use a transmission system that you really, it's hard to understand. It has range, but you haven't improved it because of backwards compatibility. Backward to what? And you're flying downwind. You're in an airport where you're flying dead into planes coming upwind. Why do planes land going upwind? Ground speed is less to maintain the same lift, therefore landing is easier, shorter. All that. It's the way you land. What? And you have to have both people wearing night vision goggles. when you actually know that you can't see as well with night vision goggles unless you're just looking for flashes of light, or which in places where there isn't much light, a lot of light around Washington. I mean, it must be blinding. And you have both people in the place. You're testing this thing and you have both of them testing. Neither of them can see.
And at that
Whoa. I
and at
mean,
that
you
location,
just listen to
all the
these things
traffic.
and you say to yourself, what? Does nobody raise their hand and ask any questions anymore? What are we doing? I don't know. I guess, hey, it's a lot of backseat driving. I do agree. But one of the things is that once you found out about it, it ain't going to happen again. You know, cruise might have been put out of business, but I can't imagine anybody building a driverless vehicle that doesn't have a camera in the front grille to make sure there isn't something that you can't run over when you start. I mean, I can't imagine anybody putting a vehicle out there that can't do that. Vehicles in the past never thought there would be, I mean, a body laying there. I mean, okay, we don't know what we don't know. We now do know that that did happen. Ain't going to happen again. Let's see if, somehow they put in these whatever helicopters that whatever the military has an infinite amount of money to spend on. This doesn't happen again. I hope. Anyway, sorry. I mean, it's just, anyway. I guess I'm just frustrated.
A lot to be frustrated about. And we want to thank Michael Sena once again for spending time with us today. And that will do it for this edition of Smart Driving Cars. You can find us and all the latest at smartdrivingcar.com. My reports on consumer tech are at techstedation.com. I'm Fred Fishkin along with Alain Kornhauser. Stay safe.